when Beto came on the scene, I've been following closely. Thrilled to have someone with his perspective, especially on immigration and other issues down there. So we are thrilled to have Beto here today to talk and to get to know him better, to hear his vision for our country, and for him to get to hear our passion and our concerns. As you know, he has been on the ground here in Iowa all week in different communities, and Beto has been seeking to restore our faith in each other and in our common beliefs, and helping to empower people through a grassroots campaign. So I am beyond honored to introduce Beto O'Rourke.
Just a little bit. Thank you so much. Tracy, Bill, thank you for hosting us, for the introduction, for bringing so many people together and allowing us to be on your front lawn under this beautiful sky. Whatever you all are doing with the weather, it is working. This is so much nicer than our first visit to Iowa just a couple of weeks back. It's springtime. It's a great moment to be alive, to be in the greatest country on the face of the planet, to have a chance to bring this democracy to its full power and potential, to meet every single challenge in front of us, not by half measure and not with only half the country, making sure that each and every single one of us, regardless of the differences between us, have a chance to participate, to contribute, to do our best at this moment that will define us forever, a moment of truth for the United States and every single one within this country. So in addition to Tracy and to Bill, I want to thank some other dignitaries who are here. I understand Sally Peterson, our former lieutenant governor, is here. Sally, thank you for joining us today. There is also a man after my own heart, J.D. Schulten, who I've spoken to on the telephone. Who hustled all over the 4th District, meeting everyone everywhere, never writing anybody off, never taking anyone for granted. Everyone counted to him. Everyone counts to him. Everyone is important. So he showed up and he listened and he learned, and he reflected that on the campaign trail. And though he came within 3 points in that last election in November of 2018, I think all of us know that there's more in store for J.D. Schulten and for Iowa and for this country. So sorry, we're having a little bit of a problem with that speaker. You all can hear us okay? Okay, great. So Tracy briefly mentioned that she spent some time in El Paso, Texas at Hanks High School. Go Knights. And then just coincidentally, I met a woman named Claudia. Claudia is in the back right here. Claudia, what high school? El Paso High? El Paso High, just coincidentally. And then earlier today at the last house party we were at, another graduate from Hanks High School. So look out, El Paso is taking over Iowa. El Paso is this extraordinary community, distinguished not just through military service, like that of Tracy's father at Fort Bliss, now home to the 1st Armored Division, 32,000 active duty service members, who in some cases are deployed all over the world, nearly 70,000 veterans who call our community home, who served as far back as World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the First Gulf War, who are coming back tomorrow from Afghanistan in our 18th year of war, from Iraq functionally in our 27th, almost 28th year of war in that country, but Somalia and Yemen, Libya as well, from places all over the world. This is a community that we call home, that is one half of the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. 3 million from 2 countries, joined, not separated by one river, the Rio Grande, in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert. It's not as green there as it is here. At the foot of the Rocky Mountains, it's absolutely extraordinarily beautiful. And part of its beauty is the fact that we are a people of the planet who have peacefully come together in one place. El Paso, one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America. Safe not despite the fact that a quarter of those with whom we live were born in another country, But because we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers, it's the very foundation of our strength, our success, and yes, our security and our safety. So know it from those of us who live on the border, we do not need a 2,000-mile, 30-foot-high, $30 billion. Our security and our safety will not be purchased through militarization, through walls, through intimidation, through fear, through paranoia, through anxiety. It comes when we treat one another with dignity and respect that we are owed both as Americans and as human beings. When everyone sees a future for themselves in their community, they want to work to make sure that that community is successful for themselves and for their kids. Folks who are called to this country to do better for themselves and the next generation, but also called to do better for all of us, to contribute to our shared success, to contribute to this country's greatness. Some of these military heroes from El Paso, Texas include Marcelino Serna, an undocumented immigrant. We call him a dreamer today, who served this country in World War I, though he didn't have citizenship or status, and came back the most highly decorated veteran from the state of Texas in all of World War I. You have the Bolaños brothers, all four of them, who served in Vietnam. And then in World War II, you had the men from Company E, little older than boys, from the high school at Bowie, which was an all-Mexican-American high school in El Paso. That all-Mexican-American unit served with distinction in North Africa, served with distinction in Italy, many crossing the Rio Rapido to their deaths, really a suicide mission against an entrenched Nazi machine gun emplacement. And they brought back honor and distinction, not just to their families, not just to our community, but to this country. Deepened our understanding of who we are and what we represent to ourselves and to the rest of the world. But I want to tell you another story about these men from Company E. And it's about their little brothers who in 1949 comprised the Bowie High School baseball team. Now, this was an all-Mexican-American school, and it was the poorest school in El Paso. Their uniforms were made by their parents. Their gloves were sewn by their moms. Baseballs were comprised of scrap pieces of fabric that were sewn together. And they had this courageous coach named Nemo Herrera, who believed in those kids despite what they did not have. And they won the city championship. They won the regional championship. And they won the opportunity to compete for the 1949 Texas State High School Boys Baseball title. It would be the first title in our state's history. And as those boys took the bus from El Paso, Texas, on an 8-hour drive to our state capital in Austin, we're a very big state, they passed one restaurant and motel after another that said, "No dogs or Mexicans allowed." Now, never mind that they were U.S. citizens. Never mind that their older brothers had given their lives in service to this country. That is how they were treated. And when they got to Austin, Texas, they literally slept under the bleachers on the field that they would play the next day. And they won that championship. They brought back honor and distinction and glory, not just to Bowie High School, not just to El Paso, not just to Texas, but to this country and our understanding of who we are. So let's think about where we are now in 2019. So many generations and decades removed from 1949, and yet we have a president in place who calls Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, who asks that we ban the travel of all Muslims to the United States of America as though they inherently pose some danger or threat to us, a people comprised of every tradition of faith and walk of life on the planet, who defines Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists as very fine people. It's not just the rhetoric that matters, that is beneath our dignity as a country and dishonors the sacrifice that has preceded us. The examples that I've just given. It is the fact, probably coming out of that one. It is the fact that those actions that follow that rhetoric are actions that we will have to live with, because in a democracy where the people are the government, and the government is the people, every single day that these conditions persist, it's on every single one of us. So when you call human beings animals and an infestation, it should not surprise us that we lock them up in cages, though they are kids, deport their mothers who risked their lives and fled from the deadliest countries on the planet today for that little child who they now have no hope of seeing again. Tantamount to torture, if you ask me, cruelty in the year of our Lord 2019. When we announced our candidacy officially in El Paso a week ago today, 4 or 5 blocks from where I stood was a makeshift pen underneath our international bridge connecting us to Ciudad Juarez, where kids and mothers and fathers in dirt behind that fence and behind barbed wire stood, sat, scared, not knowing what was going to happen to them. And that is all of us right now. This, as I said earlier, is our moment of truth. This one is on all of us. And so not only should we ensure that never again is another child taken by force from the arms of his mother when he's at his most desperate and vulnerable moment, not only should we make sure that we reunite every single one of those separated families, whatever the cost or whatever the effort that it takes to do that. Not only should we follow our own asylum laws, we should rewrite our immigration laws completely in our own image, defined by our experiences here in Des Moines or in El Paso or anywhere in a country that is comprised of immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers from the world over. Their very presence is our strength. The success for the generations that will follow will be ensured by our ability to stay focused on what has made us strong in the first place. And the only way we can do it is not by half the country and not by half measure. It will not be Democrats imposing this solution. It'll be Democrats and Republicans and independents alike listening to one another and finding a better path forward. That's how we're going to make sure that we live up to our promise and our principles and our potential. In a country where there are millions who cannot see a doctor or afford their prescriptions, in some cases even when they have insurance, who cannot take their child to a therapist, who cannot treat their schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression except to get arrested, because the county jail system is one of the largest provider of mental health care services today. We had a doctor in New Hampshire who said that he has patients who throw chairs through the windows of restaurants so that they can go to the one place they are guaranteed care, clothing, food, prescription to a psychotropic medication to make life bearable, if only temporarily, for them. We're going to get to guaranteed, universal, high-quality health care for every single American that ensures that we can see primary care providers, afford prescriptions, mental health care services. And as we are in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis 3 times as deadly for women of color, ensuring that every woman can make her own decisions about her own body. To come together and listen to one another and find not a democratic solution to this, but an American solution to this. We want to make sure that we have an economy that works for everyone. Right now, it works too well for too few, does not work at all for too many. When nearly half of school teachers in Texas are working a second or a third job just to make ends meet, though they have the most important job in front of them, that child whose lifelong love of learning, once unlocked, will allow them to do anything that they set their mind to, will allow this country, by extension, to do anything that we must. I want to make sure that that teacher, that public school educator, has just one job and that we pay her enough to focus on those kids. I want to make sure that education begins not in kindergarten universally at 5 years old, where some kids on the first day of school are 10 months back in reading comprehension, 12 months back in math, but at 4 years old in pre-K for every single one of our families. I want to make sure that when they graduate, they're both college ready to pursue higher education, debt-free, meaning free community college and debt-free public universities, but also career ready. The ability to connect with a union and an apprenticeship that will teach them a trade or a skill or a discipline they will have for the rest of their lives, that will allow them to live with purpose and function and dignity and command a real paycheck that pays a living wage. At this moment that we've seen the diminishment of unions every year for the last 30 years, let us strengthen them again, because their strength is the strength of this country. It gives every graduating high school senior, gives every returning service member in the Helmets to Hard Hats program. It gives every man whose job has been automated out of existence, every mom who's finished raising her kids and wants to return to the workforce, an opportunity to contribute to their maximum potential. This is something that we can do now, and we can do it together. And when it comes to rural America, I have yet to meet a rural American who wants a handout, who wants anybody's sympathy, who wants any pity. Instead, I meet farmers here, ranchers back in Texas, who want to make sure that they can make a profit. That's all they ask, to grow the food and the fiber that feeds and clothes not just America, but so much of the rest of the world. It allows us our food independence, and increasingly, especially in Iowa, our energy independence. Those same farmers also want to be able to do their part in combating climate change. They say, free us with the markets and technologies to plant cover crops, to capture more carbon out of the air, to use precision tilling and farming to disturb less of the carbon that is in the ground. Allow us to add value to the commodities that we once grew and the markets over which we have no control by keeping more of our young people in our communities, giving them more opportunities in high wage, high value, high skilled jobs, and partner with us on the infrastructure that we need. So much of rural America unable to get online, to finish their education, to look for a job, to start a business, to get what they grow to markets, to be able to find a date on Tinder, or whatever your dating application is of choice. When I was sharing this story in Silverton, Texas, somebody stood up, said I was a first grader in 1937. Then Congressman Lyndon Baines Johnson and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt partnered with us. They said, if you will form a cooperative here in Silverton, Texas, we will extend electricity to you through the Rural Electrification Administration. Not a handout, not a giveaway, a partnership with the federal government. And that kid said, or that man said, that when he was a kid, first grade, he could read by electric light, just like the big kids in Chicago or Tokyo or London. He knew at that point that he mattered, that he counted, that his community was going to be competitive. And oh, by the way, he said, from that day forward, my daddy was a yellow dog Democrat. When we show up for people, when we listen to people, and when we deliver to people, wherever they are, writing nobody off, as JD wrote nobody off, taking no one for granted, listening to and learning from everyone, there is absolutely no stopping us. And lastly, given the challenges that we face right now, I mentioned our economy, I mentioned healthcare, I mentioned immigration. The Missouri River, the basin that flows into it, has received 4 times the runoff of an average year, and the greatest runoff as long as we've been keeping records on the Missouri River. Not too unlike Houston, Texas, which received 58 inches of rain from the sky, the landfall record for as long as we have been keeping them in all of North America. That was the third 500-year flood in just 5 years. The fires in California, the drought in Syria that presaged the Civil War and the greatest humanitarian disaster, the floods that you see every time it rains in Charleston, South Carolina, the droughts in the Panhandle and West Texas. These will only become more frequent, more severe, more profound, undermine our ability to live in the cities that we call home today, to grow what sustains us and so much of the rest of the world. The scientists who've warned us that it is our inaction as well as our emissions that has warmed the planet a degree Celsius just since 1980, and who say along this current trajectory we will soon warm another degree, after which all bets are off on our ability to survive here where we are right now and perhaps anywhere on this globe. They also tell us we have a little more than 10 years left to us to take the bold, courageous change that is necessary to ensure our survival, and more importantly, the survival of our kids and our grandkids and those people of the future, the generations that will succeed us. So, if we are going to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, We're going to invest in renewable energy technologies like wind here in Iowa, solar in my hometown of El Paso. And by the way, the two fastest growing jobs in this country are wind and solar. If we're going to make sure that we give farmers and rural communities a chance to play their part in our success, and if we are going to take our place once again on the world stage as the indispensable country to convene the other powers of the planet together to do what none of them could do on their own and what perhaps only the United States has proven she can do, then it is on all of us at this moment. The people of the future are counting on us, and we cannot be found wanting. So at this very divided, highly polarized, hyper-partisan moment, let us not be defined by our differences. Instead, let us be known by our ambitions, our aspirations, the resolve, the service, and yes, the sacrifice that we will employ in order to achieve them. That's why I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America. And I am grateful to be here with you today. So thank you. Grateful to each and every one of you. I'm looking forward to answering the questions and hearing what's on your mind. Cynthia's got a microphone. If you'll raise your hand, she'll bring it over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First, a request. As president, I would like you to be bipartisan and maybe as your first act, issue a request for a stamp in honor of Senator John McCain. That way we can all send our condolences to this idiot that we've got now and put a stamp on there with Senator John McCain's image on it. This morning in the New York Times, there was a very good yet flawed article on antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Yeah.
So by 2050, in addition to our global climate change issues, we're going to have to be dealing with a hell of a problem that is being, that our current resident in the White House doesn't have the time to read reports and let alone understand. I mean, he thinks that windmills cause cancer. So the prevention side of public health, the dealing with the antibiotics, for example, in addition to the opioids. Can you speak to those issues? And thank you ever so much for being here on this great day.
Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate it. And yes, on that John McCain stamp. Somebody whose service we should honor regardless of what political party we belong to. We all remember that moment in the 2008 campaign when John McCain was at a meeting, perhaps not too unlike this one, and someone made some outrageous claims about then Senator Obama and offered John McCain the opportunity to pile on, and he refrained from doing that. I can only imagine and now begin to have some idea of how hard that must have been to resist as he's trying to win that election for every reason that he ran for in the first place, for public service for this country. And yet he resisted, and he said, you know what? This country's going to be okay if Senator Obama becomes our president. Instead of trucking in fear and anxiety and paranoia, he showed a civility and a commitment to service and country above party that is absolutely missing at the highest levels of power today. So God bless Senator McCain. I think you laid out this challenge that we have right now when it comes to this super fungus that is resistant to treatment right now, that we've got to have our eye on. And we've got to be listening to the scientists. And yet we're in an administration where science, like the press, has become the enemy. Where we're the one country that is withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement, though there is absolute consensus among the scientific community about the risks that we run by not doing everything within our power right now. That we lose people to diabetes, to curable cancers, to flu in the year 2019, and that we have the technology and the medicine and the doctors that challenge. We just do not yet have the political will. And how do we form it in a democracy of 330 million people? You need leadership at the very top that reflects the leadership that we see here in meetings like this one, that prioritizes the needs of real people. Now, the president has got us talking about shutting down the border, windmills causing cancer, all of these terrible things that he says to distract and to divide and to anger and to keep us afraid of one another. When we are divided, we just don't have a chance to make it. That's why this campaign and our service in the White House has to be about bringing this country together, regardless of the differences between us, to meet challenges of public health, to meet challenges of foreign policy, to meet challenges of a changing climate that will consume the generations that follow us. So you have my commitment to listen to and follow the science and the scientists. Thank you. Appreciate it. No problem.
So actually, on behalf of a gentleman that we just met today, whose 14-year-old granddaughter was shot and killed in a mass school shooting, I would like to know, what role do you think the president should play in combating gun violence? And if elected, how will you work to address this American crisis?
Thank you for being here. I carry her picture in my wallet, given to me by her mother, his daughter, whom I met not too long after she and others were killed in Santa Fe High School in Texas. And if you saw the reporting that day, you may have seen the interview that was absolutely chilling. One of those students who survived the attack was asked by a reporter, "Were you surprised? Were you shocked that this gunman entered your school and began shooting at your fellow students?" And she said, "No, I expected it would happen sooner or later." When our first grader came home last spring, Henry, 8 years old, asked him what he did at school that day, talked about his teacher huddling Henry and his classmates into a closet, teaching them how to resist the temptation to open the door when somebody impersonating an active shooter begins banging and demanding that they open up. We lose more than 30,000 of our fellow Americans to gun violence every year. No other country even comes close. And so you can reach one of two conclusions. Either there is something wrong with us, inherently violent or evil or bad about the United States of America, or this is a human-caused problem that has a human solution. And those survivors in Santa Fe and those who lost their children in Santa Fe came to the table not only with their grief, which we can only imagine, but they also came with solutions. They told me, and the Moms Demand Action have shared this as well, that in those states that have adopted universal background checks, we've seen a near 50% reduction in gun violence. So let's adopt universal background checks for every state in the union. When I listen to emergency room doctors, not the NRA, they tell me that if they get to somebody who suffered a gunshot wound from a handgun and it hasn't hit an artery or their heart, and we get to them in time, there's a good chance we can save their lives. Someone who's been shot by an AR-15, high impact, high velocity round, destroys the insides of your system. You will bleed to death before we can get to you, because it's exactly what it was designed and engineered and sold to the United States military to do. We want to keep that enemy soldier down so that our soldier has a better chance of surviving. And so keep that on the battlefield, but let's not sell any more of them into our communities so that they'll end up in our schools, in our concerts, in our streets, and in our lives. The power of the NRA is so great that the United States of America, supposed to be the world's greatest democracy, the Congress within it, purported to be its greatest deliberative body, was scared into submission and would not even allow the Centers of Disease Control to study gun violence, lest we come up with the answers to its cause. It's part of the reason that I don't take any money from the NRA or any political action committee. All human beings, all people, whose lives that I care about. So these are some of the common sense steps that we can take, many of them offered by those who have a standing on this issue, given what they have suffered and endured. Thank you for your advocacy. Really appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Beto. I really appreciated your comments, all those issues.
Yeah.
Now, I want to raise for you the idea that there's another moment of truth. And that has to do with a year ago, just about this time, people in Palestine locked inside gates inside Gaza did a nonviolent march to Israel's fences. Israel responded with overwhelming force, killing 183 Palestinians, wounding 10,000, including children, journalists, and medics. Now, the point is, the United States gives $3.8 billion annually in military support to Israel. As president, what will you do to hold Israel to account for its international law violations and its violations of our own trade and export laws?
Thank you for the question. And I want to begin by saying that we must do everything that we can to help guarantee the safety and the lives of everyone in that region, be they Israelis, be they Palestinians. We've got to make sure that we hold all parties to account for violations of human rights, for use of violence indiscriminately, whether it's rockets fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel, whether it's disproportionate use of force. I want to make sure that all lives in that region are important to the United States and that our policy follows the best long-term prospects for peace, security, the guarantee of human rights, and dignity in the lives of those who live on either side of the line is a two-state solution. Right now, unfortunately, we don't have a president who, through his rhetoric or actions, believes in that. And it doesn't look like we have leadership in either the Palestinian Authority or in the government of Israel that really believes in that if we look at their actions. So with the humility of understanding that we cannot impose another solution on another country, but with the acknowledgement that we play a unique role in that region, whether it's the funding that we provide, whether it's the power of our diplomacy, unlike that of any other country, we have an opportunity to help provide some of that leadership. But that leadership has been absent throughout the duration of this administration. I would argue that some of their actions have exacerbated the violence that we have seen in that region. So I want to make sure that we prioritize the lives there, the human dignity there, the human rights there, and that we hold all sides to account for their actions. Thank you for your comments.
West Des Moines, and if you're elected president, you can do a lot. You can do a lot more if you have a Democratic Congress, which is why we have to send Cindy Axne back for a second term. And if you don't replace 10 years with a Democrat, we also need help at our state house. We need to get at least one chamber so we can stop the river of bad that's been coming out since 3 years ago. So my question is an organizing question, because that's what I do. How are you going to help down ballot candidates, and I mean all the way down ballot, if you're the top of the ticket?
Yeah. Great question. So, following the lead of Congresswoman Axne and J.D. Scholten and you and others who helped to make that possible, and reflecting what I learned in Texas, we, prior to 2018, ranked 50th in voter turnout. And it's not because we love democracy less than you do here in Iowa. It is because we were literally drawn that way by the state legislature. In 2017, the courts found that our state legislature drew people out of congressional districts solely based on their race and on their ethnicity. Two predictable results. We like to think one person, one vote. In Texas, actually, some people's votes counted for a little bit more than others. In Texas, you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the ballot box, but you cannot use your student ID at the University of Texas at Austin to prove who you are at the ballot box. We made it very hard for a number of our fellow Texans in a state of 28 million to exercise their right and contribute to our success. So the way that we met that challenge, as I mentioned earlier, was going everywhere. All of 254 counties, no matter how blue, no matter how red. We went to where young people are, not because they're the leaders of tomorrow, but because they're the leaders right now of this moment on gun violence, on climate, on healthcare, on the economy, on dreamers, on immigration, you name it. And what we saw in Texas was absolutely extraordinary. Like JD, in our race, we came up a little bit short. But like Cindy's race, we have two new members of Congress in Texas, both Democrats, now holding seats that were forever held by Republicans. We changed the composition of the state legislature in the right direction. And in Harris County, home to Houston, Texas, 17 African-American women won races to take judicial positions of power, literally changing the face of criminal justice in this country's most diverse city. Young voter turnout up 500% over 2014. We were able to draw Republicans, independents to our side, expand the Democratic electorate, and now our 38 electoral votes are in play like never before, maybe since the campaign of President Carter in 1976. We really count. We have a seat at the table, but we cannot rest on those laurels. What we've learned is that we've got to organize constantly, all the time, in every county, concede nothing at all. Because when you concede a county, when you don't show up, you are demonstrating disrespect. Those people don't matter to you. The reason that we went to the reddest places, not in Texas, but on the planet, you can see them glowing from outer space when you're orbiting the Earth, is because Democrats have not shown up in some of these places for years. When we went to Archer County, going into Mern's Cafe for a town hall meeting, someone stopped us, pulled out a black and white photo, showed me a picture of their dad standing next to Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was running for Senate in 1948. And this guy tells me, my dad lived in Archer City his whole life. I've lived in Archer City my whole life. You are the first Senate candidate of either party since LBJ came here who has shown up to listen to us in 70 years. And here's what happens. When Democrats fear to tread, then Republicans don't have to show up either. And those folks are not functionally represented by anyone because there's no contest in November. So yes, everyone is important. Everyone counts. We listen to, learn from, campaign for everyone. And more than our words, it's asking people in those communities to canvass, to organize, to host watch parties, to knock on doors, to get people registered to vote. When we do that, this democracy is so much better as a result. So at the top of the ticket, as we were in Texas, we're going to do everything for every place on that ticket because we also realize this is not a handout or charity on our part. The strength of the bottom of the ticket is what lifts everybody else on that ticket. So school board, city council, state house, county commissioners, all the way up to the U.S. president, all of us have to be rowing in the same direction, pulling in the same direction, moving in the same direction, and that is how we're going to win. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Last night on Bill Maher, Julian Castro was asked by Bill Maher, "Are you going to go on Fox News?" The DNC has said they won't do a debate on Fox News. This is more of a campaign question, and maybe to follow up on what you just said. How are you going to reach the opposition? What's your plan to reach out to them? And are you going to go on Fox News, maybe to steal something from Bill Maher when you go in there?
Yeah. So this question, the last one, are very much related in my mind. The best way to campaign is eyeball to eyeball, where we can look each other in the eye. You can ask me any question. I can do my best to respond. Everything short of that is a substitute, including the tweets or the Facebook posts or what we do on Instagram or appearing on MSNBC or Fox News. And yet to reach the people that we want to reach in this country, as large as it is, we're going to have to be on TV. And though I disagree very strongly with the way that Fox News conducts its business, the lies that they have trafficked in, many Americans still watch that. I don't want to judge those Americans for their choice of cable TV news. I want to do my best to reach them in their living rooms, just like I'm going to do my best to physically be before them in their town. So yes, I've appeared on Fox News before. I will continue to do that going forward. I want to make sure again that there's nothing that I do that either writes people off or gives the appearance of writing people off, including those who happen to watch Fox News. So that's my answer to your question. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jamie Birch-Elliott. Thanks for being here today. Thank you for your comments related to reproductive rights and women being able to make their own healthcare decisions. I want to hear a little bit more. In the first 100 days of your presidency, what are you going to do for women?
Specifically on this issue or on all women's issues?
You get to go for it. What is
Awesome.
it?
Thank you. Earlier I was talking about economic opportunity. And I believe, and JD or Sally or someone can correct me if I'm wrong, Iowa ranks 35th in the country and the disparity between what a man makes and what a woman makes for doing the same work, providing the same value in the same number of hours. So equal pay for women is a great place to start. Reproductive health care being fundamental to universal health care. Understanding that this maternal mortality crisis that I referred to is also connected in states like mine in Texas to the closure of family planning clinics, nearly a quarter of them, making it so hard for a woman to get a cervical cancer screening, to get family planning help, to see a provider of any kind. We are losing them at record rates. So healthcare is fundamental. Paid family leave, so you can take time off to raise kids or take care of yourself in every single state in your country. That's absolutely fundamental. And then perhaps coming back to the rhetoric that we employ, the language that we use, the respect that we show one another, the dignity with which we treat our fellow human beings regardless of their gender. I think that's critically important. And I think this president has done so much damage. And the onus is on us to ensure that it's not lasting damage, that the next president, whoever she or he may be, does everything within their power, and we all get behind them to ensure that they elevate everyone, despite the differences of gender or race or sexual orientation. So thank you for those questions. Really appreciate it. That was our last question. Thank you all for hosting us. Thank you for the really intelligent questions, the thoughtful comments, for what you have done with the weather today. We'll never forget this. And thank you for welcoming me from El Paso, Texas. Eternally grateful. Thank you very much.